Hello, hello, welcome. It's time for Catalog and Cocktails. It's your honest, no BS, non-salesy conversation about enterprise data management with tasty beverages in hand. I'm Tim Gasper, longtime data nerd, product guy at Data.World, joined by Juan Cicada. And we have a special guest today, Juan, don't we?
And this is super exciting because multiple things. First of all, we're repeating a guest, which we've only done a couple of times, I think. So that's a big thing.
You're part
Number
of the
two,
VIP club.
yeah, so we have like the podcast alumni, but now I think there's a podcast super alumni or something. So welcome to that group. And so who are we talking to? We're talking to Malcolm Hawker. And if you don't know who Malcolm is, like I think you've probably also been underneath the rock for the last many years in the data world. And Malcolm, how are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm fantastic. I'm beyond thrilled to be like, return guest, which is awesome. I'm not being featured on my side with the Zoom, but I assume I'm being featured on your side, which is the oddity of the Zoom. Yes, and not the restream. Okay, good. I don't have to worry about it. That's just my
We
ego talking.
we can see you just to kind of give you all some honest, no BS, kind of what's happening in the background. This is a pre-recorded episode, and we're something happened with our platform, so we're doing this on Zoom right now, and we're streaming it, so you're seeing us streamed on Wednesday, October 30th.
Yes. Cool.
But all right,
So anyway, thank you for having me back. But I do believe I do now. Keep me honest. That our first topic, our MDM's dead, was like number one or close to being number one in terms of your 2023 total number of views. Yeah, was it not?
It was
you
a list topper for a long
it,
time.
and I think per this when we got the Spotify kind of update and that stuff, the Spotify Unwrapped. Yes, the number one episode was
Just
MDM
saying.
is MDM Day. I will say the honest no BS is that I would suspect one of the reasons that your episode I think was in February that year, so it was able
Oh,
to.
I had the whole year. Okay. Okay. I had the whole year. Yes. All right.
Well, you beat the ones from January, I guess, right? And then anyway,
I'm just saying. Okay. All
all right,
right. I'll take it.
before we get to the topic, we're gonna do this very quick. Helen toast. So, what are we drinking? What are we toasting for right now, Malcolm?
For me, this is a lovely fully oaked California Chardonnay. It's a relatively cheap one, but it's still okay. It is the, well-known Clos du Bois. You can buy it anywhere. You can buy it at HEB, Publix, you name it. But it's actually not bad for like a $10 bottle of wine.
Yeah, I like it when you enjoy it. You find and you really enjoy a $10 bottle of wine. It just makes it not only is it great wine, but it's knowing that it's $10 makes it even taste better. So,
Yep.
Tim, how about you?
You know, we're at like 250 episodes or something now, and I'm running out of cocktails that I can make easily and quickly, and so I'm starting to loop back to some favorites. This is just a classic Manhattan. Got my Amarena cherry in there, so yeah, doing all right.
Nice.
And I am tasting something that my good friend Tim gave me for my birthday, which is the Port Charlotte heavily peated one. This is beautiful, man. Thank you so much.
Peated one, what? Scotch?
Yeah, the Port Charlotte, just a single malt Islay Scotch. This is beautiful.
Scotchety, scotch.
All right. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Okay, so we are here because a couple of weeks ago, whatever, Malcolm wrote a post, which was, what is the future of data catalogs? And oh my, that thing really exploded. I mean, just as of right now, there's 200 likes or 150 comments. Like this is a phenomenal post, which right now anybody who is thinking about data catalogs and stuff there's so much knowledge in here. So we reached out to Malcolm saying, you know what, like this is such an important topic. Obviously, this cataloging cocktails for a reason, catalogs here. Let's go really digest what happened, your Malcolm's position, our position too, and kind of go through a lot of the topics here. Rules of the game. I mean, we're still honest, no BS, non-salesy. We're not going to talk about any vendors. We will acknowledge that Tim and I are employed by Data.World, which is an enterprise data catalog vendor. And we obviously have some biases because, I mean, Tim is a chief product officer and I'm the scientist here. But nevertheless, we're not going to be pushing any, we're not going to be pushing Data.World. We're not going to be throwing any catalogs. So we're not going to talk about vendors. So just want to be very clear with everybody here. Honest, no BS, non-salesy. And with that, Malcolm, honest, no BS. What's the future of data catalogs?
It's a really good question, and I think there's two answers here. There's what I would like to see and what I want the future to be, and what I think the future will be.
Hmm.
So let's start with what I want the future to be and what I think a CDO or anybody leading a data function would want to see. What I'd want to see in the future is a data catalog that bridges the gap between data management and knowledge management, that starts to play a role of helping people in the world of data to deeply understand how data is being leveraged to drive business value within an organization, to go away from the idea of data lineage to business process lineage, or at the very least be able to map them. It's interesting, it's anecdotally interesting to know that data at point A, like this customer record goes from point A to point B, excuse me, but what happens there? Is there a contract executed? Is there an item shipped to a customer? What business process is actually being enabled because that data is now been integrated into some downstream system where it wasn't before, right? How often is data being used? How often is it being referenced? How often is it associated to a successful business transaction, and how often is it associated to an unsuccessful business transaction? Yes, I fully understand a lot of this starts to look like analytics, and I get it. And I'm not saying data catalogs need to become analytical platforms, because they don't need to become that, but they need to start acting like this connective tissue between knowledge and insight and what is actually driving the business, right? And what we are managing as data librarians. That's the future I would love to see. I wish, but evidence seems to suggest that the path we're on is this fully commoditized, very, very librarian centric, and I use that term lovingly, librarian centric, where it is this thing where we manage a list or inventory of all the stuff that we manage, and it's got basic lineage and it's got glossaries in it, and it's got some basic governance rules in it, and it's doing kind of the full metadata management that is always done, but it doesn't really progress much beyond that. That's my fear, because there's a world of business outcomes and incredible transformative value, and then there's the world of what we've been doing, and I want to see the former and not the latter.
So maybe to try to interpret your two worlds here. One is a dystopian future, and one is maybe a utopian future. I don't know. It depends
Yeah.
on what you like. But in this utopian future, it's this active kind of brain for the organization, maybe metadata management on steroids, right? Of like
Yeah.
it's the decisions, it's the business context, it's the explanation of why things are happening. It's for humans, it's for robots, it's the man behind the machine. It's this
Yeah.
sort of this fabric, right? Um,
Well, I love the fabric metaphor.
mhm.
I love it. I mean, I think that's a metaphor, and I think it's also maybe potentially literal.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. If we start to go down that data fabric conversation path, right? And
Yeah.
then dystopian version of this is maybe still okay. There's probably some
Yeah,
business value there, right?
there
But
is.
it's what's the cheapest thing that gives you the basic features that you want, and maybe is interoperable enough that if come renewal time, you want to find a new catalog, you can port your metadata over to the new thing so that you can be a librarian over a new user interface.
And it's interesting, Tim, because I see this spectrum situation, the spectrum thing playing out across so many different worlds.
Hmm.
Data products, for example, right? Shift left, shift right. Data product can shift all the way left, where it's just this container of data that is used as a raw material to create analytics, right? And I think that you could make the same metaphor here. A data catalog could be shifting left, and that's all it kind of does. That's the dystopian world that you're talking about. Or it could be the other thing on the other end of the spectrum, where it is an integral part of understanding how our business operates and how data is driving business value. Now, again, I do understand that the utopian future starts to get a little murky, because we get into the Venn diagram here starts to overlap a
Hmm.
lot, right? It starts to overlap with things like MDM. It starts to overlap with integration. It even starts to overlap with advanced analytics, right? We could have a very interesting conversation to say, okay, we can agree that in this world of a knowledge-driven world, and here's where I'd love to I'm poking at Juan here. In this knowledge driven world where knowledge graphs are playing an integral part of understanding the context of data, right, near and dear to his heart, does that knowledge graph have to live in a data catalog, or can it live somewhere else? I don't know, right? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But the lines here that have historically kind of demarked data management solutions, MDM, advanced analytics, even data science, integration, data quality tools, all of these worlds are starting to kind of coalesce. And I don't know what that really looks like, but things are getting murky.
So, let me. So what we want to go do here is like kind of go through several of the comments also that came up, and I'll read them verbatim because they're just I just want to be very kind of spot on what people said. But I'll start, sorry, with what I wrote on your comment here to kind of follow up, giving your questions here. So, I said, Tim and I put out a while ago that we need to shift from a data first world to a knowledge first world, which means people, context, and relationships first. And of course, data is part of that mix, right? And I say, I dislike the term data catalog because it shouldn't be just about cataloging data. It should be about cataloging data and knowledge. Like today, we are cataloging that technical metadata, columns, tables, dashboards, ETLs.
Yep.
To be connected to the people, to the decisions, to the metrics, to the outcomes, and model the business processes of organization. Call it the brain of organization or that digital twin. We should evolve from data lineage to business lineage. We should find the data about customers and also ask the questions, how many customers, with the response back with all that context. And this is why I'm a strong advocate that knowledge graphs is the way to manage this, because it treats knowledge as a first-class citizen. And then, so I want to go into the part of you say, well, how do we manage all this knowledge? And is it the graph and does it live into one place? It doesn't need to be live in one place. And the reason why I'm very adamant about that is this really mimics the way the web has been designed and how it is created and how it lives today. The beauty of the web is that anybody can say anything about anything, right? Anybody can create any website. I can link to another website, and then I can follow that link, and I jump to another website, and suddenly I'm on a different server, and I can keep following. And there are certain governance of stuff. There are incentives for people to go do things. That's why we have standards around that. But I think there is no need to be able to say that this needs to live in one place. Having said that, we have things like Google and search engines, which they do bring in everything, and they catalog the web such that they can provide great user experiences. So when you start searching for that stuff, right? That's why you can get a million results in 0.02 seconds, right? Because they did decide to go save that, right? They crawled the web and they could do that. So I think that is how, if I take that analogy of the web, which we take for granted, again, my parentheses, it's the web, the internet, right? I think that's the mentality that we should go do. So that we should head towards. So you have systems like MDM, quality, like they're all going to be doing these types of work that involves metadata and connecting data and knowledge together. But we need to have the ability to say, hey, that thing over that in system A can be connected to system B. And if you have other things that want to be able to pull that together, that's fine. And that can be a catalog. That can be an MDM tool. That can be a quality tool. That could be whatever you want. But I would argue that a catalog would be kind of like the Google. And I think in some of the
but does it have to be standards based, Juan? Like so you're pointing to the web and W3C and stuff. I know that you're deeply involved in and know a lot more than I do. But like getting into OWL and RDF and all this, like does it have to be standards based, or can the AIs just kind of figure this stuff out? And I know that I'm being like really pithy and glib, but they seem to be pretty good at language. They seem to be pretty good at context, right? Does this world need to be standards based, or can it be more probabilistic? And given all these factors, given all the things that we see in the metadata, this is kind of Gartner's view of active metadata, right? Given all the things that we see in the metadata, can't we just figure it out? Does it have to be standards driven?
And one thing is it being standards driven. Another thing is it being non-deterministic in a way, right? I think we shouldn't separate that. We should separate.
Fine. Yeah. Okay.
And I would argue that these remember that this Gen AI stuff is trained and stuff from texts, and this metadata is not necessarily text, so you got to go extract all that stuff. So bottom line, I mean, this is a possibility. I mean, but at the end of the day, you do want to be able to track like the the observations of the world. And I mean, I would rephrase eh, the argument that you're bringing is I don't need a database anymore. LLMs can ask anything about that. So maybe let's screw databases into that. And I think
Maybe. Do you remember
fair
a
point.
conversation we had? Do
So
you
is
remember
that
a
the
conversation? I don't know where we were because you and I run into each other like in like these amazing cities in the world. And it's such, yeah, we live crazy lives. But I asked you somewhere, and probably after several glasses of wine or beer, I can't even remember. And I asked you the question of, okay, so what would happen in a world where business applications like CRM and ERP or even transactional systems, e-commerce sites, doesn't matter, like any transactional system or any business application, why do we put things into tables? Can't we just start capturing the narrative of the business? Like as a story, as literally a story, right? Like what we are capturing is a story that describes the business, right? And I know this is getting like really way out there, stuff, but you told me at the time, you said you were going to go to Japan and figure it out. I think I'm not entirely sure if you went to Japan to figure it out. You probably didn't. But this describes two ends of the spectrum, right? Which is highly deterministic, rules-based, intersection of a row and column. And I know I'm oversimplifying, but our current world and the future world here is a story of the business. And how do we bring these things closer together? I think a data catalog will play an important role in that in the future. I don't have all the secret, look forward. I don't have any magic forward-looking glasses. I wish I did. I'd be a crypto billionaire. But I do know that we need to start thinking about these things differently. And you touched on something, right? Which is non-deterministic. And to me, that's a paraphrasing way of saying, context matters. And it can't be a one rule rules them all. It's multiple rules based on the context, based on who's creating the data and who's using the data. So anyway, can we start capturing a narrative of the business? And what role would a catalog play in being the historian, as it were, of the business? Or telling the story of the business and telling the story of the things that matter the most to the business? I don't know. I'm being rhetorical here, and I don't have all the answers, but I love the idea of a knowledge-based world and catalogs helping provide a bridge between where we are and where we need to be. And it's the stuff that you're working on day in and day out. It's all the research you're doing around knowledge graphs and vectors and finding ways to stop LLMs from doing crazy hallucinations.
I think.
Sorry, you
Juan,
go.
do you want to go first? You can go
You
first.
you go first. You go.
All right. Well, I'll let Juan chew on that for a minute. The one thing that I wanted to jump in on is that um I think that if we want catalogs to be more active, to be more involved and closer to the business, to be that fabric, right, that we kind of talked about in this utopian vision, um, it needs to do different things than it traditionally has done, right? Because there's a version of the future that is just more of the same, right? More sources, more lineage, more rules and policies, right? There's a version of the future which is just more of that, right? And I
Yeah.
think that leads more towards that commoditized path. But what you're talking about, I think, and I think what Juan, the research you've been doing and the direction you've been trying to push is like in a new direction. And what that new direction is I think a little bit opaque right now. Like I don't think we're 100% sure what that new direction is, right? Is it just all in on AI and let's let the LLMs run loose and, see what exciting
Mm.
things they can do? I for sure know that AI is part of the solution, but is it the solution? I don't know, right? Um, Another interesting X factor, unstructured data, something that's super important to LLMs. They speak that language. Traditionally, catalogs don't really care or deal with unstructured data. You may hear other things from vendors or them say other things, but the honest no BS is that in general, other than the metadata about unstructured data, catalogs tend not to have to do with the unstructured data itself. And there's a lot of knowledge in there, right? The third and last thing I'll mention in this kind of rant is that, interestingly, and this is potentially the most salesy thing that I'll say in this entire conversation today, but don't interpret it as a salesy thing. Interpret it as a proof point. Is that at Data.World, the customers that we see having the most adoption are the ones that aren't hyper focused on the technical aspects of a catalog. It's
Yeah.
the ones who are building a marketplace. They're building data products. They're focusing on AI use cases. They're building out a catalog of recipes of the kinds of analysis that you want to do. Find the recipe to accelerate your ability to get the answer to those questions, not the customers that are hyper focused on lineage, which is a little bit counterintuitive, right? So I think that's an interesting data point towards what could this knowledge oriented future be.
Yeah. Well, so while one is not stewing, processing, to number one, is are LLMs a parlor trick or are they the future? I really see them being the latter, right? I see, and it's not necessarily just don't think about, ChatGPT and Bard and Gemini. Don't necessarily think about that, and don't think of them as just LLMs, because I think it's the combination of LLMs plus all the AI that we've always been doing, right? Natural language processing, even just garden variety correlations, machine learning, put all these things together. But I think how we'll interact with those insights will be through LLMs, because they kind of look and talk and think like us, right? It's the chat body agent type nature of LLMs. It's their interface that I think is going to draw us naturally towards them. And I honestly truly believe, Tim, that they will form the backbone of, in essence, a new computing platform. Just like the internet did, and just like the cloud did, I think LLMs will become a next generation computing platform. And if you are a data management vendor, or if you're a CDO and you're not thinking about this stuff, you need to be thinking about this stuff. So to point number two, unstructured data, couldn't agree more. Good grief. Like, yes, it's outside the scope of most data catalogs, because it's outside the scope of most governance programs, right? How many CDOs out there know how many files or how many PDFs are sitting on their marketing SharePoint sites? None. I mean, it's like marketing is just doing its stuff out there. Customer support's doing its stuff. They're creating FAQs. They're creating all of this unstructured data, all these PDF docs, all these Word docs, you name it, that are the narrative of the business, right? That are describing the core product. They're describing even customers, the customer wants, and they're sitting out there in unstructured data, and it is the wild, wild west. For 2 years, we've been saying, data leaders have been saying, we need to double down on foundations. Meanwhile, largely continuing to ignore unstructured text, while it is the thing that LLMs are built on and optimized by, right? So unstructured text.
Just think about like Microsoft Copilot and these different tools. Like, they're getting pointed to your like SharePoint. And oh God, as a governance professional, when's the last time you thought about governing your SharePoint? Probably not.
Well, right. Like cold shivers, right? Oh my God, what's out there? I don't even know what the people in marketing are saying, right? Like just basic stuff beyond access controls. It's like, even what are they saying? This is the Air Canada use case. It's where you got something out floating under a SharePoint server that is like woefully inaccurate, and an LLM picks it up, and then all of a sudden you're getting sued. So yeah, we've been talking about getting our hands around foundations, but we've been doubling down on our old foundations, not the foundations we need to be focused on in the future, which absolutely positively will include unstructured data. And between the dystopia and the utopia, unstructured data, to me, that's a layup, right? Tagging this stuff, profiling stuff, tagging this stuff, getting that into a data catalog. If you're not doing
the knowledge
that,
out of it.
yeah. If you're not doing that, I mean, you've got to be doing that. So the third point, what was the third point? I only had one glass of wine, but the
fact that adoption really comes not from the most technical use cases, but the knowledge orientation.
Yeah, I mean, yes, absolutely. I do see catalogs playing a role in being the marketplace, as it were. But as an end user, I don't want to go search for an object, right? Most data catalogs that I look in, and if I do a search for customer, I get like 400 things that spew out to me. I mean, that's not actionable. I can't. What I want to do is I'm trying to cross-sell more. Hey, catalog agent. Hey, catalog copilot. I'm trying to cross-sell more. What do I do? Right? Like, and maybe we could argue that's not a use case for a catalog, but I see data observability as being this little tiny microcosm of what is possible in, arguably, let's call it a fabric-enabled future, right? Mm. If we can look at, scads of weblogs and transactional data, if we can apply some basic ML to start, understanding when pipelines will fail, we most certainly can start doing the same thing to business processes and say, you know what? Some salesperson did something really stupid and inputted something incorrectly or missed a field or something. And we know this process is going to slow down because we've got all this transactional data that tells us the process is going to run slow and the data looks like this. So then take this action to fix it. So go ahead.
I gotta interrupt. That example that you just gave, that should be kind of a very clear stepping stone of what's next. And do we need LLMs for that? Whatever. I don't know. Probably not. I don't, but at this moment, I don't care. Hold on. I'll talk about the LLMs for a second. But I think you just nailed it right there. That we continue focusing so much on the technical stuff, right? And then we need to kind of elevate it more. I talk about the business lineage. You just said right there, like I want to have like business observability. It's like, oh, I mean, I think we have all these kind of analogies we can do. This is the stuff, this is the tech we do for this data. How about if I use that for the business? And then I think that should be the evolution. What you just said is what I hope becomes commoditized in a future type of data catalog, whatever it's called. It should be, hopefully in a couple of years, it should be like, obviously, we have a system that automatically detects when a salesperson puts in bad data in here, and it's going to affect how we're calculating our projections for our revenue this quarter. Like that's the type of stuff that the freaking CRO wants to know about this immediately, right? So that's the I want to go push the notifications to people that's going to drive to end users that's going to drive money. So I think goes back to the topic I want to hit on kind of connecting to the business value. But going back to the whole, we'll take it back to the LLMs. I think the LLMs and all this generative AI is also going to help commoditize more of the data, the data catalogs. I don't want to fill in descriptions for these things and find relationships. Like I know nobody wants to do that. That technology is going to go and commoditize that. So that is something hopefully in the next year, it's like done. Like this is something that we know is happening. I think the other question you said is, if I'm searching for data, right? Because why are you searching for data? Because I'm trying to do some cross-sell analysis or whatever. It's like, so you're not really searching for data. That's a means to an end. What you're trying to do is find the cross-sell, that stuff. And definitely that's where the LLMs are going to go help, because I can be able to have that interaction and be able to say, this is the problem I'm trying to solve. Help me solve this problem. And the system will say, well, one way to solve that problem is that you need data. And I know where that data is. And another thing that you need to know to solve that problem is the context, because you want customers. Well, we have all the definitions of customers. So we want to have that you want to be able to talk to that brain, whatever. I mean, this is why I don't want to call it anymore a catalog. It's the evolution of this is called the enterprise brain, right? Which enterprise brain is cataloging and has all this knowledge about what's in your brain. So that's another thing how LLMs are definitely going to help. So number one, make commoditizing it faster. Number two is having this, it's your, the way one of our colleagues, Vip Farmer from WBP, he says, AI now has a UI. And it's great because these LLMs are giving us this UI to be able to go interact. I think that's the second one. And a third one, it's going to be an accelerator to catalog all of this knowledge that exists not only in text, but also in people's brains that they've actually never put it down, where I can finally say, I can interview you or record a conversation that lasts 1 minute, and that's enough for me to say, boom, I'm going to go pull that in. So I think that's going to be another accelerant. So I definitely, I'm with you about how these LLMs are definitely part of the future, but it's all going to be focused on thinking not just about the technical stuff. And I think thinking about the knowledge management is already a path to think about the business, and then always driving the business value.
Well, so what I see happening is, I gave a presentation, I gave a keynote last week at a semantic layer symposium in Munich. And I was talking about this transition from data management to knowledge management, which is really metaphorically what you're talking about in the last rant. One, which is the knowledge of the business. And some people, and I made a couple of posts last week about this, and people rightfully said data management is not going to go away, right? And maybe the metaphor here is like photography. We went from dark rooms to digital photography, and you still need to know, like, the best photographers will still know, how developing will actually happen. But I honestly think that data management as we do it today will largely be obfuscated and automated. Right. It'll be automated and then it can be obfuscated. If there's appropriate levels of trust, if there's things are appropriate for the use case. And I think that AI will largely help do that. Is this a 2-year horizon? No. But is it a 5-year horizon? Yeah. Yeah, I actually think so. And it's not a stretch to start thinking about fully automating a lot of the data management we do. Getting back to the use case about the, business observability. I love that. Trademark, business observability. Brilliant. If we get back to that, what we can start to do is basically, if I can hold a phone up between somebody speaking Mandarin and my brain and tell the phone to tell me real time what that person is saying, they're speaking Mandarin and what I'm seeing is English. We can put something between the business application and the database layer to immediately correct problems or bad data or problematic data. And the AI will know that this is a problem given the context, given the use case. So the more we do that, the more we automate this, the more the business processes will improve, the more efficient we're going to be as businesses. And that's a virtuous cycle that will continue to feed on itself over and over and over again. So, I would love to hear comments, and I've made a lot of posts about this, and it's kind of like poking the bear on LinkedIn when I start talking about automating data management and automating data governance. There's a lot of pearl clutching that goes on, man. But I think we can do it. I think we necessarily will do it.
So before we go in there, I do want to read some comments here on the topic of knowledge management. So several of these come up on your post. So one, Ole Olsen, actually also former podcast guest. I hope everyone here gets that knowledge management is an existing domain with existing technology. It is. And that's really, really important. I'll acknowledge that I come from the data world, and I don't know myself so much about the existing knowledge management world. And there's so much over there to do that. So that's an interesting point. Jessica Talisman, also a former guest, it says, I believe the tool or technology exists in the knowledge management space. Like anything else, catalogs are evolving tools in the data domain, and the knowledge management aspect is part of this evolution. While cliche, libraries cannot exist without catalogs, and I believe in the data space, catalogs have been implemented incorrectly, are underutilized, or have not evolved with the business. Hate to say it, but a data catalog that can leverage a knowledge graph is pure gold and can support knowledge management. Anna Bergevin, also former podcast guest. This is Tim. We're so
it's the who's who. I brought him out.
We're so freaking lucky. We get to meet all these people. Anna said, I agree that knowledge management is the way of the future for data catalogs. The structuring of context from one where AI has access to free text and a small amount of metadata to one where AI can access known facts between the business concepts, metrics, reports, and systems. That's the game changer. Parentheses, Malcolm, that's what we're talking right now. I love it. I want to be able to, I'm here to go solve this problem about cross-selling, right? That's what I want to go do. Continues, so much knowledge sits in the minds of humans, or at best long-form text documentation. We need more verified facts and relationships to help AI move towards greater precision and reliability. And in the meantime, that documentation also makes things clear for the humans who are accessing that catalog. Andrea Gioia, who's going to be a guest next week or this week. +1 for knowledge management. Anyways, there's more knowledge management over there, but I think what was really interesting is that when you wrote this post, knowledge management became a theme. So that's just an interesting observation.
Well, I'm a recent convert. I mean, I'm not entirely a recent convert. We've been talking about context for a while. I live and breathe in the MDM space, and our first interaction got back to context and what is the context, and customer to one person may be something different that is customer to another person, and they're both right. I love the comment about business facts. I love that, and it kind of aligns to the kind of the business observability thing, right? Which is, could I turn to the catalog through some sort of agent or copilot, maybe? And say, if I increase the price by 5%, and maybe this isn't the data catalog, I don't know, but what, or maybe if I improve the data quality by 5% of our customer related data, what happens, right? What are the downstream impacts of that? What are the downstream impacts on customer service? What are the downstream impacts on logistics, on supply chain, I don't know, right? Like that's kind of where we're starting to get to, because those are the relationships that matter. They're buried in the relationships of the data, but ultimately it's the relationships that the business cares about and not necessarily the data. It's the relationship between customer satisfaction and revenue. Like that's the stuff that we need to figure out. We've got the relationship from like a join perspective. We know that this table is linked to this table. And we may even have this existing knowledge management world, to Ole's point, to others' point. We may have that, but we don't have that connection between the data, the ontology of the data, and what actually happens at the business.
How can we actually make that happen? And just to give that a little bit more context, I feel like, you know, we've been stuck in this, I'll call it a local maxima, right? Assuming that there's this promised land of AI and fabric kind of in the future, right? But we're in this local maxima right now where it's like, we've got databases, we've got ETL tools, we've got analytics tools and BI tools, right? Well, all of these things are ultimately hammers, right? To tie back to your example you gave about 10 minutes ago, like cross sell. I want to cross sell better. Like that is something conceptual. Today, the interface between sort of the conceptual use case or the intent, right? And the data and everything like that is some combination of metadata, business logic, rules, and frankly, probably the vast majority of it is floating around in people's heads, and that's why we have data analysts, right? How are we going to bridge these things?
Well, you're really talking about, I think, articulating the business value of better data management, of the insights that we're talking about. And let's stick on the cross-sell use case, because I think it's a really, really easy one. And my dogs are wrestling in the background. So if you hear growling, it's my dogs wrestling in the background. This is the joy of working from home. Let's take the cross-sell use case. This is a simple relationship, right? Where you've got customer A is related through company to product A, but they're not related to product B. Right? Like that's a simple graph we can run right now that says they're buying product A, but they're not buying product B. Right? Done. How do I and fuel me that and provide me that insight, which we can do today. What you're really kind of talking about, Tim, though, is what is that actually worth to me? Right? And how do I calculate that? That's a separate podcast issue. I will go to my grave like Mel Gibson, Braveheart-ish style, screaming, "We can do this! Business valuation." We can quantify the value of better data. We can quantify the value of these insights, and anybody that tells you cannot, I think is perpetuating a myth. Can we do causal relationships? No, we cannot do causal relationships, but there are business units like marketing, like HR, like procurement, that are running entirely on attribution models. Can I say that $1 spent on marketing, $1 spent on the Honest No BS podcast, Catalogs and Cocktails podcast will equal $1 of sales? No, I cannot. But I certainly can get to the point of helping attribute sales or attribute brand awareness or attribute other things. The marketing function literally runs on it. And we could do something similar in the data world. So kind of getting into a little bit of a rabbit hole related to valuation of and how do we value these things. But again, it's all in the data. It's all in the data. It's in the metadata. It's in the transactional data, right? It's in the knowledge graphs that we need to be deeply embracing in the world of data and analytics. It's all there. And it may not be causal, but the relationships most certainly exist.
I want to bring up a couple of comments on this topic about like the business value. And sorry, I'm going to be honest, no BS and bias. I'm picking up a lot of former guests here. So Aaron Wilkerson.
Love Aaron.
We need a reset and a fresh start. As an industry, we took the business too literally when they said, "I want to know what data we have." We took the phrase and uploaded our entire database, data warehouse, lakehouse environments into a data catalog, only to realize that was way too much for a reasonable human to understand. Does anyone really need to see the 1,000+ tables you maintain? We need a more simplified, curated experiences for these catalogs. We need to adopt a business-first mindset, but we also need to understand the use cases that require catalog implementation and dedicated resources to maintain. This is where the knowledge-first perspective is helpful. How do we track business objective initiatives back to the data team's work and present that in a platform? So I think that's
bingo.
So bingo on here. And then another former guest, also Neil Burge, we had an episode about him doing all his research about like why people buying catalogs. And he says in his research, there's four broad buckets that drove people to buy. Right. Number one, someone else just got a compliance fine, buy a cheap data catalog so we can tick the box and go back to real
Yeah.
business. Two, we got McKinsey, we got Accenture, right? We got we got a big the big folks come here. The board are on a path to a data-driven business. The data catalog is a stepping stone towards the success or not of the CDO being fired in 2 years. That's what he wrote. We have a sprawling data estate and an inefficient data team. We need a single pane of glass, and the data catalog will provide it. A long, hard slog and mostly technical exercise. And then we have grown using data and outgrown our data landscape. So our growth is at risk if we fail to buy tools for the data team. A data catalog might help if we focus on the data driving our growth. So I think that's also very clear, right? Compliance, right? That's what I'm being told to go do, making efficiencies and actually supporting for growth. And I think at the end of the day, I think it's kind of obvious that a future data catalog should be, well, it's all connected directly to the business, what we're trying to go do, how to be more efficient and how to drive growth.
Yeah. So can we take just like 1 minute to acknowledge like two things? One is that I continue to be overwhelmed by the fact there remains a place online. There remains a social media, we can call it social media, but there remains a social media platform where people can have great discussions about this stuff. Like I find that amazing in our day and time that there is still, yes, it's LinkedIn, but we can that it exists and we can have conversations and we can disagree and we can grow and we can learn. And I've learned day in and day out from LinkedIn. The second thing I want to acknowledge is that people take the time to add their input, right? And to add these comments. And whether it was Neil, whether it was Aaron, whether it was Jessica, whether it was Ole, whether it was anybody we've talked about, like when I think about this stuff, like, thank you, because I'm smarter, I'm more enriched, I know more because of what they're doing. And I just kind of, honestly, when I step back, I'm like, I get a little overwhelmed by it because it's so awesome. So maybe it's an advertisement for LinkedIn, maybe it's an advertisement for podcasts like this, but you know, it's a really, really good thing that we're having these conversations as data leaders because we need to be having more of them. So anyway, yay business value. Yes.
Cheers for that. Amen to that. Yes, for sure.
Which is awesome. And all those guys, like, you know, so smart and have so many good things to offer. It's just, I love being on LinkedIn and I like hearing what they have to say about all of this stuff. Because my intentions,
for those that are listening, you know, follow and connect with us and the community. The discussion is happening. So if you're not a part of it, come join in.
Yep. The water's warm. Lots of room for everybody. So, you know, to finish on the last point, yes, I mean, Neil's points I think are extremely well taken. You know, and if you were building a product roadmap, and you know, maybe Tim, this is where we can start talking about some of the difficulties faced in building a product roadmap here. But if you were just building a product roadmap based off of that type of customer feedback, right? You would be building a fairly defensive, fairly status quo-ish, fairly MVP type catalog. And you know what? Honestly, for a lot, it would be enough. It would be enough, right? And that's okay, right? If that meets your requirements and you are, and that's all you need to do. But I do see, I honestly truly believe that there's transformative value here. And yes, we need to acknowledge it's not just a silver bullet. It's not just a technology. We've been talking about a different way of managing our businesses, a different way of managing governance, a different way of managing data. But I just aspire for a lot more because I get really excited about this stuff. I get really excited about it because we've been talking for literally decades about how data can transform businesses. And I think we are on a precipice here. I think a lot of it has to do with AI, and people who figure this stuff out will be driving transformative value. I have no doubt about that. No doubt.
So if I'm connecting all this stuff in my head right now, and I see a lineage, a path around this, which is, I think the three main topics we've had in this discussion has been around AI, Gen AI, LLMs, has been about the whole knowledge management, and I'm going to put kind of bring in the unstructured stuff in here and the people and the knowledge management. And then, of course, the business value around this, right? Connecting always to the business. And I feel that we've having these conversations about, oh, how do we show the value of providing to the business. I would argue that the part that has been missing has been that knowledge management part. And I think we are now starting to talk about the knowledge management and realizing that we actually need it is because of the LLMs and generative AI. So I think it's fascinating that or the way I'm seeing it is like the generative AI is this catalyst, this inflection point to say, oh, it's amazing what it can do. And I see it from a consumer point of view. I want to bring it to my enterprise. But for my enterprise, I need to have more context. I need more of that knowledge, which there is already in all the technical metadata I'm doing, but there's just so much that I need help to automate a bunch of that stuff. So that's one thing. But it also there is all this there's like I now need to kind of move from this data first to this knowledge first, context first world if I want to do that for the AI. And guess what? Like the business, if I'm talking about the metrics, talking about the cross-selling, whatever, that's really the knowledge of what's in people's heads and stuff that I need to be able that has been missing. So I
Yeah.
kind of feel that we're making this really great connection around of generative AI and LLMs with all this knowledge management, and which altogether will help drive the business value. And I think the question for me is kind of where we start off, is this one place? Is this one tool? Is this one technology? Uh, uh, and I think it's kind of hard to say it's going to be just one thing because I think the pendulum always swings, right? We go
Yeah.
from monoliths and it goes back. And I think we'll find kind of a balance of things of like what's the minimum, what's an MVP of
Yep.
of a best, I know we say this a lot, the best of breed stack of things, but I think in this MVP, this MVP will include things, of course, LLMs and generative AI will include the whole knowledge management, which itself there's so much to unpack, and then overarching it all together is very clear the business focus, the business value.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be one thing. It probably isn't because most IT buyers and most IT leaders have like kind of these antibody responses to monolithic tech stacks that do everything and pretend and portend to solve world hunger. Our BS meters just kind of immediately go up. But speaking of BS meters, I led a data analytics function for many years. And when I would hear people like me and analysts talk about all this future related stuff, I'm like, okay, that's fine, dude. That's interesting, but let's bring it home, right? Because I got problems to solve right now. In that vein, if you align and kind of are excited to some of the things that we've been talking about, if you see the future of data catalogs going this way, if you see the future being more aligned to knowledge management, the traditional data management, what could you do today as a data and analytics leader to start moving gradually that direction? There's a few things that I would be doing. Tim touched on this earlier. One, unstructured data. We need to expand the scope of our governance and management practices into unstructured data. No if, ands, or buts. Two, knowledge graphs, complex RAG patterns, vector databases, implementation of some idea of a chatbot copilot today, right? Using maybe more of a complex RAG pattern that is optimized through text, right? Or optimize using a knowledge graph to answer maybe some fairly basic use cases that are internally focused only. So you can mitigate and manage any of the fallout that may be associated to hallucinations because you're never going to eliminate them completely. And you probably don't have the resources to put a human in the loop with every touch point between a copilot and a smart agent and somebody, looking up your HR policies through your new HR chatbot, right? You probably don't have the manpower to put a human in the loop all the time. So there will be spillage, there will be hallucinations. But if you are looking to be a forward-leaning data leader and you want to check the box on AI, there's some great stuff here and there's some steps that you can start taking today, right? I'm not advertising for Microsoft. It doesn't matter, but there's a lot of tools out there to go build copilots right now. They're out there right now. Learn by doing. Start tinkering. Start playing with some of this stuff now. Get familiar with knowledge graphs. Knowledge graphs are not going away. They're going to be part of this foundational stack. If you don't have this technology, if you're not familiar with this technology, you need to learn it. Another way, start thinking differently about data. Start thinking differently from the perspective of it's not just these deterministic rules. It's not if ands or if it's not these kind of highly structured ways of looking at the world. Start thinking about context and more probabilistic approach to the world. Start thinking more probabilistically about things. Start thinking about how context matters. And what is true to somebody in marketing may not necessarily be true to somebody in finance, and they can both be correct at the exact same time. That's okay, right? We need to break away from all or nothing thinking. We need to break away from deterministic ways of thinking that pigeonhole us to this false belief that things are either all one thing or all another, because they're not. They're not. These are some simple steps we can take as data leaders today. Up our game around AI, up our game around what do LLMs actually run on? How were they built? How were they created? What data went into creating OpenAI? What data is needed by these systems to run better, to run faster, to eliminate hallucinations? These are simple things we can do now, just right now. Sorry, I'm ranting a little bit, but as a data person, you start talking about future stuff, it's like, okay, that's great, but what can I do today? And there's some things that we need to be doing right now.
Yep. I think you stated that beautifully. And part of that are things that organizations can do uh, just programmatically and via initiatives and via, the projects that they're running, right? You don't necessarily need a vendor or a product to
No.
help you start to tackle the governance question around unstructured data, or to start to develop your copilot for your business, or to start thinking differently about data. You can
Yep.
start to do that today as a data leader or as a data manager, trying to align yourself with where exciting innovation is happening and where the best value is happening.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. There's one thing that I didn't really touch on, and we had talked about this earlier, is this idea of a catalog as a marketplace.
Hmm.
And I would aspire for more, because I don't want to be a service desk, right? As a data leader, I don't want to be a service desk, take your ticket, get your solution and move on. I don't want that. And I don't want to be just a store. I don't want to be transactional. I don't want to be where somebody walks in, gets their stuff and walks out. That's not what I want. I want to consult to my business partners. I want to help them understand better ways to run their business. This is a consultative interaction, not a transactional interaction. So if we can start thinking about that way, yeah, I love a catalog as the storefront, right? As the door that people would come through. But instead of there being this, transactional, I'll give you this and now go away, here's your dashboard, right? Or total DIY. Maybe some DIY is appropriate for some use cases for people that are, NoSQL or not NoSQL, KNOW SQL. That for some, maybe DIY is okay, but for others, DIY is not going to be okay. Your CIO is not going to go, or your CEO is not going to go DIY, Tableau. It's not going to happen, right? So maybe a more bespoke interaction. But again, this idea of the catalog becoming the place where business insights, where you go for business insights instead of just going for a dashboard. I would argue a part of that would necessarily include this idea of product management, not data products. Data products are the how, like data products, but the real why and the what here is product management and putting the customer at the center of everything you do, and design-centric thinking and other things that Neil has talked about and many others have talked about. So yeah, I love the data catalog as a storefront, but I don't want to be transactional, because there's very little value in being transactional and just selling stuff like you were on Amazon. It's really about becoming a business consultant.
To interpret kind of what you're saying in another light, you tell me if I've got this take wrong here. The future of data catalogs is not to become a data marketplace. That's a very small and potentially very useful, but it's a very small aspect of the future.
Well, maybe there's an agent there that is your internal version of a Deloitte consultant, right?
Yep.
Maybe the face of the catalog, for lack of a better term, is like, here's your internal HR consultant, your internal BCG, or your internal McKinsey consultant. Maybe I'm totally spitballing here, like, but not just being transactional.
I mean, this is what I think bridges into what could the future look like, and maybe as a sort of a final question, sort of a two-part question here. What does the future look like in the medium term for catalog, and metadata management? And then what does the future look like longer term for, catalog? And, I have some thoughts on this too, but I want to kind of start with you, Malcolm. Like, what's your take? Like, what's the medium term look like? What does the farther future look like?
I think that the medium term is data catalogs and the practitioners that are using them day in and day out. start using them as a way to move closer to this world of data management or of knowledge management. And a good starting step there is using the catalog to manage and govern unstructured data, right? Like just spread your wings over all of that unstructured data. You help your catalog to do it. Push your vendors to do things like profiling and discovery of this data, tagging of this data. If your catalog isn't doing that, push your vendors to do that. That's, to me, that's the medium term where it is like, okay, wow, I know now that I've got 15 different versions of the same FAQ that all say different things. Right. That's worthwhile, right? Because I can deploy data quality to that. I can start to fix that. Longer term is everything that we've been talking about is becoming this place where the facts of the business. I love that term. The facts of the business are it's the repository of the facts of the business. It is holding the narrative of the business, of the truths of the business in a highly contextualized way. I love that.
I like that language as well. The repository of the facts and the narrative and the story of the business.
Love it.
So I think that's a great vision of the sort of the medium term and the long term here. I think I agree with a lot of your perspective here. The one additional thing that I'll add, which is just a sort of who knows, like a who knows what might happen, right? Kind of a comment, and then Juan, I'm curious for your thoughts on all this. Is I feel like the traditional boxes in the architecture diagram in the longer term, I think the medium term, it's going to be pretty stable. But I think in the longer term, AI and LLMs and whatever LLMs become as they continue to iterate is going to very much confuse, hopefully in a good way, the data space. Because to your comments earlier, right? Data management, like we're going to get to a point where we automate data management. Like you're
Yep.
going to get to a point where you can say, I got this much money to spend. Here are my systems that I use. Hey, agents, manage this stuff for me. And if you're confused about anything, you let me know and I'll weigh in, right? And it's basically going to be your infrastructure or data engineer, automated, autopilot, right? That's going to happen. Is it going to be 5 years from now? Is it going to be 10 years from now? We don't know, right? But that's going to happen.
One quick parenthesis. So
Yeah,
just,
yeah,
I just like I believe in that. Like writing the code, the pipeline code, the observability, the things that all will be automated.
Yep. Yep. All of that's going to get automated, right? It's going to be conversational, and when it has questions, it's going to converse with you. But more and more, if you're crawling your unstructured data and all your knowledge and things like that, it's going to know. There's going to come a point where your AI knows more about the business than if you got your 10 smartest people in the room talking to each other. The AI will know more, right? We'll
Yes.
get to that point pretty soon here. So then what happens to the data stack? Like what is going to become of that? Do you need analytics tools? Do you need ETL tools? Or does that really start to look much more like knowledge capture, knowledge governance, and where appropriate, human in the loop? What is that? We don't even have a name for that thing right now, right? And
Well,
like that to me is like 10, 15 years from now, the future might look pretty different.
well, if you ask me, there are indicators of this already happening. And I hate to use a specific vendor, but I'll use a specific vendor because
Yeah,
from
sure.
my perspective, they are a little ahead in this. I look at what Microsoft is doing from their instantiation of the fabric. And
Mhm.
it's a V1 product. It's got a long way to go. But what I would argue what they are doing, and yes, it's a conversion to Delta Parquet, and it's fine. But what they are doing is commoditizing persistence, right? For a long time, well, persistence mattered, and this vendor had this type of persistence, and this vendor did this, and this vendor did this, and we are fast approaching the point where who the hell cares, right? Is persistence really a value driver to the organization? So if we think about a stack, if we think about it literally as a vertical stack, where we are moving is that at the bottom of that stack will be increasingly commoditized. And we will, as we commoditize persistence, we will increasingly commoditize the management. Then we will commoditize analytics to a certain degree, but there will still be value at the higher levels of the stack, and that's why the focus on business and business outcomes and business management and business processes is so important. Is so important because that's where the value is moving. We are commoditizing the base layers of the stack, increasingly. So I would even argue that data management software will increasingly be commoditized. Tim, we talked about this earlier, to the point where there will be no fundamental difference between one and another because AI, this will all be a function of the AI. But I think we're already seeing this. I think we're already seeing it with arguably what is the commoditization of the persistence layer.
This moment right now is why I feel extremely lucky that we get to do this podcast and talk to so many people. What you just said, Malcolm, just connected so directly with a podcast episode that we did with Dale Williamson. He's the field CTO of EMEA Databricks, and we had this exact same conversation.
Interesting.
Like the stack going from data to knowledge, and he's like, look, at the bottom of the stack, which is where we focus, it's data and kind of technical, it's engineering mindsets, and it's where we focus. We're able to be organized standards because heck yeah, it's easier to go do. We have Parquet, we have all these tile formats, and then we go up the stack. That's why we have SQL and all these things. But the moment that you start getting higher, we start getting to this fuzziness, and then we have to go deal with the people and the knowledge and the politics and all that stuff. Like that's the part where it's harder today because we have to deal with all these stuff. By the way, the LLMs will actually help us, basically help us drive that context. So getting up the stack we're driving up that stack, and as data professionals, we get into that fuzziness, and what happens? Well, it's too complicated humans, and we go back to our stack. And I think this is where we're going to start seeing the definitive leaders, people saying overcoming that and using the tools and technology that we have today with this new generative AI and LLMs to help us overcome that fuzziness and feel comfortable getting into the knowledge world, working with the people, and overcoming that fuzziness. So,
Yep.
that is
Love
a great combination. So this, Tim and I were like, do we have a takeaway? Like Tim and I, we have been taking notes, but I don't think we would do a service of like summarizing, because this conversation is the takeaway of like 150 comments of your podcast. And I think I think people need to listen to this entire episode. Or do you want to do any final words, comments? Because we've already been here for, I don't know, over an hour now.
No, for me, no. It's my honor to be here. It's my honor to have a platform to share my cockamamie ideas about what's going to be in the future. And I reserve the right to be completely wrong. But you'll never say that I'm short on passion.
I think if there's something people take out of it, is that the three of us are very passionate about what we do.
Hey, we're excited to see a better future. And I don't know, Malcolm, any final thoughts? Any final parting thoughts for the listeners?
Well, if you're still here, for one, thank you. I hope that you have found value in the last hour. That is my goal. If we're not already connected on LinkedIn, please connect with me on LinkedIn. DM me. Tell me I'm crazy. Tell me I'm right. I don't care. I will have a conversation. Love to continue the conversation online. Please let's connect on LinkedIn. And thank you, Juan and Tim, for doing this. It's fantastic.
Hey, absolutely.
Welcome.
Let's make the utopian future become a reality, because I think that we all in the data industry and beyond, we have our finger on the button and we can control where this thing goes. So let's make the future that we're excited about.
Thank you so much.